Grand Theft Auto and controversy. Name a more iconic duo. I'll wait. But seriously, the GTA series has been making headlines since the 90s, in the face of backlash, outrage, public outcry, all while laughing all the way to the goddamn bank. But out of all of the controversies, there is one that stands out. One that actually resulted in the game being pulled from store shelves. Which is saying a lot. Running over crowds of civilians? Fine. Killing people with chainsaws? It's all good. Blowing the head off of a hooker and stealing her cash? It's no problem. None of these things resulted in the games getting pulled. But simulated sexual intercourse between two consenting virtual adults? Cancelled? Disgusting. Ugh. What kind of perverse, sick fuck would do such a thing? That's right. Today, we are looking back at the hot coffee controversy. GTA San Andreas is one of those once-in-a-generation type games that has stood the test of time. The fact that it's still being memed to this day says something about its lasting appeal, and its cultural relevance. It's still relevant, it's nuts.
Oh shit, here we go again.
And for good reason, the game is awesome. I've been revisiting San Andreas, playing it all week, and while some things like the combat haven't aged all that well, it's still a super fun game.
All we had to do was follow the damn train, CJ.
GTA San Andreas hit store shelves in October 2004 for the PS2, and was an immediate smash hit with players and with critics. IGN scored the game a comical 9.9 out of 10. Just give it a 10. And the game we know now drew a crap ton of controversy, but not immediately out of the gate. By the time San Andreas was released, Rockstar had already released GTA 3 and Vice City, and weathered the storm of controversies that surrounded both of them.
A group of 13-year-old boys is carrying out a reign of terror on screen that would put them on the nation's most wanted list in real life.
So while San Andreas certainly pushed the envelope and did draw the expected criticisms from the media, with extra flack given for how the game handled the race, it hadn't yet devolved into the shitstorm that we know is coming. Shortly after the game's release, over on the website GTAforums.com, members were of course deeply invested in playing and discussing GTA San Andreas. The forums were also home to a lot of the GTA modding community, and in late 2004, modders were able to extract and view San Andreas' code, this being from the PS2 version of the game. Discovered amongst the files a set of animations with names like Sex, SNM, Blowjobs with a Z. Curious, the user by the name Barton Waterduck created a viewer that allowed them to see the basic wireframe animations and what they looked like. And what they found were a set of animations depicting explicit sexual acts that were not anywhere in the actual game. Like the files, the animations, and all that, the data was there, but seemingly inaccessible during actual gameplay. And this was discovered in late 2004, more than 6 months before the hot coffee controversy. And again, this was the PS2 version of the game. At the time, despite being able to view the files and the animations, they weren't yet able to do anything with it. And what's super interesting is the modders decided to keep their discovery private. Reason being, if it garnered too much attention, then there was a good chance that the developer Rockstar would remove them from the game's inevitable PC release, where the modders actually could do something with them. One user on the site, Patrick W., painstakingly went through the game's code and its scripting to understand where these animations would trigger and under what context. Realizing that everything needed to activate these scenes were there, but simply disabled, by early 2005 he was certain if the animations were still on the PC release of the game, he'd be able to overwrite the code, preventing them from being executed.
Straight back into the game, right, dog?
GTA San Andreas was released on PC on June 7th, 2005. In Europe, some players were able to get their hands on the game a few days before the street date. One user with early access was able to provide Patrick W. with the game's script files. And sure enough, the animations, the code, they were all there. And Patrick W. was able to make the necessary edit and send the updated script file back to the European modder. And in little time, they were able to confirm exactly what this hidden sequence contained. And it was more than a simple cutscene. No, it was a fully playable, sexy time minigame.
This shit is beautiful.
And just like that, the mod was done 2 days before San Andreas was released on PC officially. Patrick W. decided to make the mod public, and the word mod is a bit loose here. While yes, technically it requires modifying the game's files, it doesn't actually add any additional content to the game. Instead, all it does is restore previously inaccessible content. So definitely the distinction of mod gets a bit blurred here. And under the name Hot Coffee, it was uploaded online, and it was the very first mod available for GTA San Andreas. And what followed was an absolute clusterfuck. The Hot Coffee mod absolutely blew up, broke all kinds of site records, and was downloaded over 1 million times within the first month. Now, for context, in the original unmodified version of GTA San Andreas, our main character CJ, in between taking on missions and waging war against rival gangs, he was able to take certain female characters out on dates. The dates would usually involve some sort of minigame or sometimes just a simple cutscene. After building the relationship meter high enough, CJ could then get invited inside the girl's house for coffee.
You wanna have some coffee?
Which would then trigger a short cutscene where the player would only see the outside of the house, but it was clear they were having more than just coffee. Now, in the modified Hot Coffee version of the game, everything's the exact same except, after getting invited inside, a sex minigame is triggered, where the player would need to move the analog sticks to match CJ's coital motions. Successfully moving in the rhythm with the thrusting builds the excitement meter, featuring full controller rumble and everything. You can also switch positions, switch camera angles. The entire sequence even starts off with some straight up fellation. Now, in the grand scheme of things, the movements, how it's all depicted, yes, it's provocative, it's explicit, but it's also important to note that there's no genitalia or anything like that actually shown. To be honest, it's not that bad, but certainly nothing else like it had ever been done in a mainstream video game before.
You got time for a coffee, CJ?
And after unlocking the sequence on PC and understanding how to change the censor flag in the game's code, modders were able to get the Hot Coffee mod working on PS2 as well. In fact, all that was required was a simple edit to the game's save file. You didn't even need to have a modded PS2 for Hot Coffee to work. Really, you just needed a way to transfer a save file from your PC to your PS2 memory card. Now, solely for academic purposes, I tested this out myself. And sure enough, here's Hot Coffee running on my PS2 Slim. For research, of course. The emergence of the Hot Coffee mod and the magnitude of its popularity not only made news across all of games media, but garnered attention from traditional news outlets as well. And it was not the type of attention Rockstar wanted. Not at all. The company found itself in a crap ton of hot water. A few weeks after the game's PC launch, the Electronic Software Ratings Board, or ESRB, launched an investigation into the Hot Coffee content, which didn't stop politicians from also pointing the finger at the ESRB for apparently failing to properly rate the game.
Whatever you say, bitch.
The outside pressure, the controversy, the threat of legal action, it was a lot. It was a dark time for Rockstar, and for the GTA community as well. Over on GTAforums.com, people began to point the finger at the modders and at Patrick W. in particular for all of the negative attention that the game was receiving. On July 12th, Rockstar released a statement. So far, we have learned that the Hot Coffee modification is the work of a determined group of hackers who have gone to significant trouble to alter scenes in the official version of the game. In violation of the software user agreement, hackers created the Hot Coffee modification by disassembling and then combining, recompiling, and altering the game's source code, which was a blatant lie. It was an extremely simple mod, and users on the GTA forums were quick to call Rockstar out on their bullshit. It wasn't enough, however, and pressure from government continued to mount, with at the time Senator Hillary Clinton at the forefront of the crusade against graphic video game content. And on July 20th, San Andreas was re-rated with an ESRB adults-only rating, which resulted in the game being pulled from basically all major retailers. Rockstar's parent company, Take-Two, dropped their fiscal expectations significantly, and overnight their shares dropped by 6%. The adult-only rating was significant. Only a handful of games had ever received the rating, and it was basically reserved for straight-up pornographic games, which is why most major retailers refused to sell them. For me, as a kid, back in the day, I remember all of this happening, and I would have been about 15 years old at the time, and I had a copy of GTA San Andreas. And despite having no way of doing the mod or accessing the Hot Coffee content, my parents saw all the news and took away my copy of the game. God damn. Internally over at Rockstar is an entire other story in itself. During development of the game, then president and co-founder of Rockstar Sam Houser wanted it all in the game. Games have pushed the limits on violence before, but sex hadn't really been explored. But late in development, ultimately, the decision was made to cut these parts out of the game, as to not risk getting an adults-only rating by the ESRB, a decision Houser was strongly opposed to. The cuts are everywhere. It doesn't feel like we are pushing any boundaries now. Why bother? And the issue of actually removing the content was more complex than simply removing some lines of code. It was very late in development, so the solution, of course, was to keep it in there, but simply disable it. To quote Sam Houser again, "We locked it away because there was no other way to get the game done on time safely. The code is very interwoven in, and everything reacts to everything else. The impact of yanking something so late is too scary." And so the game was shipped with the sex minigames in the code, but just inaccessible. And of course, we know what happens next. Back to the summer of 2005, after being pulled from store shelves, Rockstar quickly rushed out a new, clean version of San Andreas, void of all of the hot coffee content, and found its way back into stores a month later near the end of August, with its M rating reinstated. And although San Andreas was pulled from store shelves, there's still tons of hot coffee versions of the game out in the wild. The traditional black label version of the game actually has two versions. If your copy says second edition by the ESRB rating on the disc, then that's the clean version. If it doesn't, then you have yourselves a hot coffee version of the game.
Oh shit.
The whole ordeal cost Rockstar and Take-Two a whole lot of money. Several class action lawsuits were filed, not to mention all the lost sales due to the negative publicity. To this day, the hot coffee incident remains one of the biggest controversies in gaming history, affecting not just the industry, but how video games are perceived by the non-gaming world. It put the industry once again under the microscope of Congress, a place it's been before. In late 2005, Hillary Clinton introduced a bill, the Family Entertainment Protection Act, FEPA.
This bill will prohibit the sale of violent and sexually explicit video games to minors,
which basically would have made it so that the ESRB would become federally mandated. And luckily, the bill did not get passed, and to this day the industry continues to self-regulate using the ESRB. Thank God. In the grand scheme of things, Rockstar of course bounced back. This was but a minor road bump in their path to becoming the video game industry giants that they are today. In 2008, the company released the much-anticipated sequel, Grand Theft Auto 4, a game set in Liberty City, Rockstar's own version of New York. One of the game's landmarks, the Liberty City version of the Statue of Liberty, bears a striking resemblance to a certain US politician. And in her hand, held up high, a cup of hot coffee. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Deep Cuts. As always, please let me know what you thought about it. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. It really does help this channel out a lot. And then consider binge watching some of the other Deep Cuts videos using the playlist. Thanks for watching this one, guys. Peace!